So those are the things we're going to run through today. Donald Trump said that he's going to announce, so we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the officially unofficial announcement that he's going to announce at some point soon.
Yeah, exactly. So before we do that, I want to thank everybody, of course, for joining us. Bill, Bo, Deborah, you guys are incredible. Thank you for being back here again.
Yes.
I want to remind you, of course, to like, share this with your friends, comment on everything like you've already done here. You can find all of our other content on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, of course, Patreon, Salty Streets. Go there to the Patreon, subscribe, help us make more, better content just like this. Right before this, we did what we called the review preview for the book club. The book club book this month was 1776 by David McCullough, and next month it is going to be this book here. It's called Don't Hurt People and Don't Take Their Stuff by Matt Keeby.
So, a Libertarian Manifesto.
A Libertarian Manifesto, yeah. And this was a different review preview. It was a written piece, mostly written piece that I did, which I actually just tweeted the actual document itself out on my Twitter at Salt of the Street on Twitter. If you want to go read the written portion of the document, it is there, or of the video, it's there. We have our own personal social media. Like I said, I'm at Salt of the Street on Twitter and at alpaca_Donovan on Instagram. And calls it Big Bird Off you on both those things. Beer show, book club, newsletters, all those things. Yeah, newsletter on the last day of the month. So $5 a month. Get to the newsletter. It's a written piece by Colin and I individually. And I do want to remind everybody, I always mean to do this at the beginning if we have to do it, to evaluate and adjust your relationship with the CCP as much as you can. Every episode, I mean to do this in the beginning and always forget to do it. So that's it, right off the top.
I like it.
Evaluate and adjust your relationship with the CCP. So
powerful.
Yeah. With that, Colin, let me ask you this. Okay. Right in the vein of what we just did with the review preview. Okay. How likely do you think a national divorce / a civil war is? Or do you believe that a shift to a new system is possible, a la the Libertarian Party, the Mises Caucus, things of this vein, right?
Ooh.
And I'll let you think more to provide more context. The Libertarian Party, the Mises Caucus specifically within the Libertarian Party, is obviously a third-party option within the United States political system. So they obviously see the system itself still as a viable opportunity, but use this party as a means to gain power and shift the system in the way they can that will better benefit the people of America.
So initially, right off the bat, I think I want to separate it into two categories. I want two different answers, really.
Yes,
I think the greatest chance we have for changing the current system that we have is via the Libertarian Party and its, astronomical rise in popularity over the last few years. I think that's probably I don't know if it's the most possible or the most likely scenario to happen, but that is probably the best alternative vein that doesn't involve some kind of separation of the nation,
a violent
balkanization,
revolution.
But at this point, I don't know if it's hard to gauge. It's hard to gauge the everyman's perspective on a national divorce or civil war. I know the concept of a civil war now is way more likely than has ever existed since the last Civil War. We'll put it that way. I don't know. Again, I think after your review preview piece today, I've got some other things to think about. And as per the usual, I'm probably going to shift my written piece this week to kind of build off of that, just because I think it's more in the vein. My original written piece is basically going to be stuff we talked about in segment 2 today. And so I think I'm going to shift away from that because I'm going to cover everything I want to cover today. And I think that's more topical. But I don't, at the end of the day, I don't know what is more likely, because for a civil war to pop off in some fashion, there needs to be some form of greater organization involved, because it needs to be widespread enough. Eventually, it can start with one, with two parties, and then it eventually has to be adopted and spread over a grand scale. And I'm not saying that's not possible. I just haven't really gamed out what that might look like, which hence the piece, I think, at the end of the month. But it is definitely more possible today than ever. I don't see national divorce being possible. There's a few hard questions in that generally revolves around nuclear weapons and the ownership of those. And I don't see like a a USSR style Cold War. Okay, this is how we're going to split up the nukes. And, you know, after that whole era went and, you know, all the nations kind of agreed to just have that those nuclear states are just going to stay nuclear. Nobody else really gets them, all that kind of stuff. There could be some treaties like that might occur, but with the state of society as it is, I don't see that happening without some serious bloodshed going on. And, you know, nobody wants that to happen. And if they do, they don't know what they're talking about. But, you know, the irrevocable differences that we find ourselves having today, the ability to agree to disagree has ceased to exist. And states are becoming more hardline every day regarding those types of issues, say like around abortion and things like that. And there's no compromise that both sides are willing to have. But the makeup of the people that are willing to compromise, I'm not aware of their numbers yet. I don't know if it's the vast majority of people or if it's a minority of people. Because those are the people that are going to matter. Mostly because, as we saw in like the Revolution and in the Civil War, you know, the vast majority of people don't participate in the fighting.
Right.
Most of the people,
estimated 3% of the people at the time involved in the actual fighting of the Revolutionary War on the side of the rebels.
Yeah, and the Civil War much different because then you actually had national armies and things like that. So it was a lot higher number.
I don't know if I said civil. I meant revolutionary.
You said
war.
revolutionary.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, it's because everybody always likes to think about our previous Civil War. And I think we've discussed this. I don't know if we discussed
Civil War
I.
I've started to call it.
Right. And because that's the way I think of it. And you mentioned it in the piece, and I know we've talked about it off air. I don't know if we talked about it on the show, but if there is going to be another Civil War in the United States of America, it is not going to even come close to resembling the first Civil War.
Right.
It'll look a lot more like every other Civil War in history around the globe. It'll be groups of militia and organizations having guerrilla warfare with essentially against the state at that point. And, you know, take a look at Africa, Mogadishu, and everywhere in the Middle East, and like all these different places where civil wars are essentially constant.
Yeah.
That's what it would look like in my mind. And then how do you game that out? You know, there's a lot of things there, but I think the chances are higher than ever because people are at wit's end. And the major concerning point that makes me think that is the economic situation. It is bad. It is worse than anybody has seen. Most people alive today have not been in a worse economic spot than today. And on that level too, you combine that with the societal divide, the continual deterioration of the governing bodies from the state level all the way up to the federal level. It's not a good thing when I look at it as a whole. I don't understand how this could end any way but bad unless there was some kind of a miracle and a third party like a Mises Caucus-led Libertarian Party essentially comes in and then starts making changes. Severe changes would need to be required. And even then, you will see a rise in violence. But I don't know if it would burst into a nationwide divisional thing like that. So, yeah. That's my answer to that.
That's good. Over here, Bilbo Swaggin says, the way the laws are being implemented based on political affiliation has already started the Civil War, but not in the traditional way we think of one. And I don't disagree. Yeah. And that's why I framed this question kind of, I guess not as specifically as possible, but around like a proper Civil War, national divorce, a separation of this country into multiple nations. Mm-hmm. And that is, as Colin referenced the preview video that we just did, that is a lot of what I talked about in there. So again, for more context on that, you can go to my Twitter, and I just tweeted that out. So it's the first thing at the top of my Twitter is the actual document that I used.
And I just liked and retweeted.
So there we go. It's the top of Collins as well. So you can go to either one of our Twitters and you can find that document there. With that, we can break into some local stories.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so...
Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready.